When I'm doing the computer-aided manufacturing, or the CAM, there are a couple of items that I use pretty regularly that I'm going to need to go through the process of creating, and library features are a good way to utilize like a stock envelope and a target. So in the process of generating CNC code off of the models, there's always situations where I have to decide if I'm going to treat the part like no additional stock, or if we have stock sizes that are pretty consistent, then I would want to use that as defining my 000 location in that 3D space. So one of the ways we can do that is to create a target, and a sort of rule with the library features is I don't want to tie this to the origin. I want to maybe get close or somewhere in the vicinity. And so my target is a circle with lines through it. And we'll go ahead and put a dimension on it. And what this is going to do is something that I can drag and drop into any model. And it needs to stay undefined, be able to move it around. And we'll accept that sketch. All right, so when I bring this into a part, this isn't going to work with the assembly. We'd have to do something slightly different with either a part, a design library part, or additional geometry in that setting. So for parts, I can go ahead and say save as, and in our list of types, we're going to be able to come down to, and looks like they put it in alphabetical order. So SLDLFP, library feature part. And of course it goes program data, SolidWorks, SolidWorks design library, buried way deep. I hate putting them there, so I'm going to navigate back to my cloud system files, and I created a design library folder. And we're going to give this a name and call it a target. And I usually go lowercase with those. All right, so the target will come in as a library feature, and it will ask if I want it to stay connected, or I can dissolve it into the current part. It really doesn't matter. And the symbology is that there is a little L next to this sketch. And when we go to dimensions, we'll see each of those referenced on the geometry. So I come back over here and I look for my design library, and it's not there. So I want to add a file location. And we're going to go back to the quick access and navigate to my system. And I'll add the design library folder so that when I click on that, that was the original, and then there is my target. So I can close that, and it's just going to stay a standard SLDLFP. There's times where if I create something kind of complicated, then I might want to save the part somewhere so that I have it for reference to go back to. So another useful for the CAM side, and then I have one more that I use regularly that I'd like to add to that folder. So for this, I'm going to use same basic process. I could use a center, and it would put in my my center lines, but I need one of these unattached. So I'm going to take a center line from corner to corner and then come back and leave one just sort of floating there. And I'll go ahead and put a point at the intersection. Now there is my midpoint. So I want to do the select midpoint, control select, go midpoint, and I will go ahead and put dimensions on this as well. So if I do something kind of standard 4 by 2, then when I drag and drop this into my part file, I'll be able to change those sizes to whatever I measure my stock out to be. All right, again, it's not attached to the origin. If something happens that I want it to be centered, then I have the point to relate to, and that gives me enough information to create my my stock. So with the sketch selected, I'm not sure if I mentioned that before, but you definitely want to make sure that your sketch is selected. And File, Save As. We'll go back to our library feature part, and I missed. And we're going to set that to be my my stock envelope. So I'll just abbreviate that. And it defaults back to the standard design library, which you can create a folder under there and add it. But again, if you're using it across multiple computers, having this on a cloud is pretty handy. And then by habit, I made it caps. But since this is something that I'm adding, I want it to look a little bit different, be a little bit more identifiable. All right, so I come back over to the design library. Now I have my envelope. And then another useful trick is actually a feature. So let's go ahead and create a corner. So a lot of times we'll drill a corner out. And so in this situation where the solid is going to actually be part of the system, then well, let's see. How do I want to do that? Let's make it a sketch first, and then we'll look at it as a solid. All right. So on this group, then let's go with a line, and then we'll go with a 3-point arc. That was the circle, so let's go 3-point arc, and I'm going to drag this out. Whenever you see the dashed lines, it's asking you for additional information. The distance between the arc and the line is going to be my offset for the corner, and let's make it 0.5 millimeter, 20 thousandths. And then I need a little bit over a standard size, so maybe depending on how deep this pocket is, how deep I need these corners to be, I would want to be anywhere from 5 to 10 thousandths oversized. So if I were to make this 130, I could use a 1/4 inch end mill. That would give me a pretty good size. And so the other thing is that this is going to be rotatable, and we don't really have a position or anything, so we'll just have to see how this works. So I'll accept that and make sure that the sketch, so pretty much the thought is that if you just exited the sketch, it'll still be selected. If for some reason you click somewhere else, then you'll have to reselect it. So let's go back into the library feature part, navigate back up to my cloud drive, and then this is going to be a corner. And save it. All right, so if this were a part then, and we'll look at these a little bit more in the with the cam. So on the front plane, let's S key, and we'll just make a quick part with a pocket. So if I right click and extrude, can bring that out some distance, and then S key. Let's see, I need to right click and go into a sketch, and then I'll go back into my rectangle. And this is what I want with pocket, but round tools don't cut square holes. First rule of machining, I guess, is or one of the top 10 rules of machinings that we can look at. So if I make this 1/4 inch deep, and that becomes my pocket, I'm not going to be able to make that a square corner easily. We could make a sinker EDM. Since it's not through, it's not going to be able to do a wire EDM, which burns the material out with a very small wire. So in this case, I would want to look at taking the corner piece, dragging it into my sketch. the values are alright, so we'll just edit the sketch. And it has a little pop-up, so we'll find some place to put that. And I'm going to drag this to where I get the coincident. And then notice that once it goes coincident, I can set an angle. So this has an advantage that if I'm putting a square peg into this square rectangular hole, this pocket, then I will have this much gap. All right, so a standard process, and one that I've seen done quite a bit, is just to draw a circle. And the problem with the circle is, unless it's big enough, the tool's not going to flow into that. You're going to have to do that as a separate operation, or plunge an end mill into the corner, which is fine for manual machining, and often easier. Not a whole lot of manual machining going on if there's any kind of complexity to a part. So that being said, putting this in the corner, I could still do this with a manual end mill, plunge it in, walk the pocket around, clear out the center geometry. It'd have the same effect. So I want then a center line, and I'm going to do this on each corner. So I'm going to try and find that midpoint. We'll go that way, and that way, so this becomes fully defined. And then we're going to mirror. I don't see my mirror, so we're going to go to Sketch Tools and Mirror Entities. And let's see if we go from left to right, should just be what's in the box. And right click, Sketch Tools, Mirror Entities. And then my feature becomes, oh, let's see, this is still inside of the feature. So that would be interesting, because if this is really associative, then it will carry that back. So this might be one that I would want to dissolve. So let's see, there it is, dissolve library feature. So that breaks the link. And then we'll have to see if it changed anything. All right, so make sure that that's selected. Go in and do an extruded cut. Go up to surface, the bottom of the pocket, and then place it. All right, and then we'll come back and we'll hide that sketch. All right, so at each of those corners then, if I were to go in and put a small radius, fillet, and maybe 30 thousandths, and then we'll pick another one and use the find all of the inside edges. Then I get a pretty clean transition, and my 1/4 inch end mill in most cases is going to be able to go into that geometry. All right, so let's go ahead and drag that in. I know that there are rules that govern that associativity, that there are times where it may push that change in the geometry back to the library feature, so we just want to be aware of that. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Maybe we'll do it for future reference. I'll add it. I'll add some dimensions and bring it into the system. So we'll make this a cam part. All right, and then if this was going to be an actual drag and drop feature similar to the part, we would be generating the same type of thing, and we'd get a little bit more functionality out of it maybe. So let's go one more time, rectangle, and I just want to generate part of it. So this is going to require existing geometry. And the size here isn't important. So we'll extrude that out, extrude it out some distance. Okay. Generate our geometry. rectangle. Go ahead and extrude. I want to cut extrude that, so extruded cut. Now we'll go ahead and make it the 0.25. And then we're creating the same geometry. The difference here is that I have all of these other features. So I pretty much have to have something that looks like this when I go to drag and drop this this feature. So see, we're going to sketch, create the line. So if I was just building one of these, I might go ahead and draw it. It's not that, oh, okay, got a little carried away there. Extra click. I might go ahead and draw this. It's not that big of a deal, but if I'm doing a lot of these, then it's pretty handy to be able to create this geometry. So let's escape a couple times. I'm not sure what I was picked on. So 20 thousandths on the corner. And if I go ahead and put in the 45 degrees, some distance, well, 135, we'll have to see about fixing that. And that was interesting considering that it pulled, so 180, well, we're at 225. All right, and then our diameter / radius, we'll go with the 130. All right, and then isometric view, go into the cut extrude, and go up to surface. So when I drag and drop this feature, it should ask me for a couple of items on the selection. All right, so this is the feature that I want. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and save this as my my default, my corner part. And that way, if something happens to the library feature, or I forget to select and try to save it and ends up being empty, I can come back to this. So save as library feature part. Now this is going to actually be a feature, so that was the corner. So let's go ahead and give it a full corner feature. All right, and then we'll try it real quick. So new part. Open up Sketch. We have to go through the same basic process, and I'm going to forego defining all of these just to speed things up a little bit, but extrude out some distance, pick another sketch, create our rectangle, and then whatever distance, since it was an up to surface, it should ask me for that surface. So let's pick a different number then, and that's a little deep. So we're limited by the length of the end mill, of course, and taper and some other things that we might have issues with. But if I come back over here, find my corner feature, and drag and drop it in, notice that there are more items that, since we did define it in those terms, it's going to ask me for, and it's showing me a preview, but I can't quite see it. So edge 1, I assume it's going to be one of those guys, and edge 2 would be one of those, and then the face would be the bottom. So let's see what that looks like. All right, so it sort of made it. It found some of the geometry, but so this would be the error checking portion, since either I messed up the order and needed to watch those, or no, that one should be okay. And then since it's in that embedded, let's go ahead and edit the sketch. So I might have flipped it around, or it's just not finding that that geometry. All right, so this takes a little bit of debug, so maybe we don't want to put the angle in. That would be something that we go back and delete or remove. So let's pull it that way, and we'll go 45 degrees. All right, so that really wasn't much of a time saver on the first go around, but if I was to mirror those again, or I was doing a lot of those and having the feature in the extrude, then it would be something to have as our advantage. Or if the geometry was a little more complex, we might want to have that built in. All right, so we're going to use these and in the manufacturing side and see what we can do, and then further develop this library feature when I figure out what I actually told it to do, and instead of it doing what I wanted.